So we have seen in the earlier lectures that the derivative of a function is a linear map. So, and I had made the comment that the definition we have given, of course, is true on all finite dimensional Euclidean spaces, that is Rn and Rk. But the same definition also works in infinite dimensions, in Banach spaces or Hilbert spaces. So, I just want to make a statement here, which if you understand it well and good, if you don't, then it doesn't really matter, because we are going to be talking only about finite dimensional spaces. So, for example, if L2 of R, now this is going to be a bit of a confusion, so I should call it L2 of R, I should call it L2 of R. These are square integrable functions, square integrable, Lebesgue integrable functions on R. So, if P is in L2 of R, what this means is that norm of P, which is integral over R of mod Px squared dx, okay, is a 1/2. This is finite. The L2 norm, what one talks about this is saying that the L2 norm of phi is finite. So I want to define this map, which I will call something. Let me call it define eta from L2 of R to R by eta of phi. Where is phi? Phi is a square integrable function. And I'm going to define eta of phi to be equal to norm phi squared, which is a real number. So remember, where is this phi? This phi is in L2 of R. And where is this? This is a real number. So this is a well-defined function from L2 of R to R. So the exercise is calculate the derivative of this map eta at some point phi, which is in L2 of R, and I can take a particular function phi. So the particular function phi that I will take, or let me not take a particular function, derivative of eta at phi. Where is phi? Phi is in L2 of R. Where should this lie? This should lie in linear maps from L2 of R to R. And therefore you should be able to tell me what? Derivative of phi, derivative of eta evaluated at phi at some point in L2 of R. So I'm going to take one particular function in L2 of R. So let me take this h. Where is h? H is in L2 of R. So what is this equal to? And it should be linear in h. And is it a continuous map? So this is an exercise which will just try to convince you that the definition we are given actually works also in infinite dimensions, because this space L2 of R that we have is the Hilbert space of square integrable functions on R, and that is an infinite dimensional space, and therefore there is no question of talking about partial derivatives. Partials, derivatives do not make sense. So in some sense, this is showing you that the definition that we are giving in terms of partial derivatives in finite dimensions does not really work when you're talking about infinite dimensions. So there's a similar example, which is, so let me just mention this as an example, which again, this is just to make you understand that the derivative, in fact, the way we have defined the derivative is the right example. So another infinite dimensional example for those of you who understand what's going on, and don't worry if you don't understand what's going on right now, but some of you do. So I'm going to take the Hilbert's, the Banach space L. Again, I should not call it L, I should call it L infinity of R. So what is L infinity of R? L infinity of R is equal to all those p's from R to R, such that P is measurable, whatever that means, it's not too important, and Phi is bounded. So they are bounded functions, which are also measurable, whatever I mean by measurable. So I'm going to define eta. It is clear that if a function is bounded, the square of the function is also bounded. So define eta from L infinity of R to L infinity of R by eta of Phi. Where is Phi? Phi is a bounded function on R, which is measurable. So I'm going to define eta of Phi to be Phi squared. Where is Phi squared? Phi squared is another bounded function on R. And the exercise is calculate the derivative of eta, and I'll give you a particular function that is bounded. The function that is bounded I'm going to call sine. Okay, so sine is my phi. Phi of x is equal to sine x. Is phi a bounded function? Yes, it is. Okay, so derivative of eta at this point should be a linear map from L infinity to L infinity. So you should be able to tell me what derivative of eta, let me call this phi 0. Phi 0 is sine x. So derivative of eta at phi 0 multiplied, evaluated at the point, some point in L infinity. I'm going to give you a particular function in L infinity, namely E0 equal to what? Where E0 should be an element in L infinity, a bounded function on R. So I'm going to take E0 of x is equal to e to the minus x squared. E to the minus x squared is a bounded measurable function. You all know what the shape looks like. So what is the derivative of eta at phi 0? What is phi 0? Phi 0 is a function sine, evaluated at the point E0. Remember, these points now are functions. What is E0? E0 is the bell-shaped curve. This is the bell-shaped curve. So try to understand what these objects will mean. And if you do, that means that you have understood what the meaning of the derivative is. Very good. So the derivative of a function is a linear map from Rn to Rk. This immediately led us to talk about the second derivative. The second derivative of f at a point, second derivative of f at a point E is a linear map from Rn to linear maps from the second derivative of f at a point is a linear map from Rn to linear maps from Rn to Rk. Notice that this thing linear maps from Rn to Rk is a vector space of dimension of dimension n times k. So the object here that I have is a vector space of dimension n times k, and linear maps between this vector space and that vector space is also a vector space. And therefore, linear maps from Rn to linear maps from Rn to Rk is a vector space of dimension n times nk. So this object that we have is a vector space of dimension n times nk. And it's a very good exercise at this stage to find a basis of this vector space. Exercise, find a basis of So the second derivative lies in this vector space. We have introduced one more idea in the previous lectures. What were they? That was the idea of bilinear maps. So I can denote it by L2 Rn Rk, and this consists of all t's from Rn cross Rn to Rk, which are bilinear. I hope I've written bilinear. Yes. What does bilinear mean? Just let's remind ourselves. It means that when I keep this variable fixed, t is a linear map in the other variable, and when I keep this variable fixed, t is a linear map in that variable. Now if you just try to count dimensions, okay, keep this first variable fixed, then t is a linear map from Rn to Rk. So when this first variable is fixed, t is a linear map from Rn to Rk, and therefore that gives you something which is a n times k dimensional space. But each of these points in this first variable is an n-dimensional object, and therefore you hope that linear L2 of Rn Rk is also n into n times k dimensions. So guess that L2 Rn Rk is n into n times k dimension. So yeah, I should also make this statement here that bilinear maps themselves form a vector space. So it is a vector space. So now I have these two different vector spaces, L2 Rn Rk, which I hope is an n into n times k dimensional space, and L linear maps between Rn and linear maps between Rn and Rk, which I know is an n times n dimensional space, n times nk dimensional space. So we know that any two vector spaces of the same dimension are isomorphic. So we'd like to prove that these two vector spaces are isomorphic. But before we do that, there's an exercise here also. Find the basis of L2 Rn Rk. Again, if you're able to do this, you would have understood what is meant by bilinear maps, and you would have understood what is meant by this space. So these two spaces are, we hope, are vector spaces of the same dimension, and therefore they must be isomorphic. So we'd like to prove a theorem, which will say that the two vector spaces which two vector spaces? Linear maps from So which two vector spaces are we talking about? Linear maps from Rn to linear maps from Rn to Rk, and bilinear maps from Rn to Rk. Okay? This is my definition of bilinear maps, and that space is a well-defined space. So these two vector spaces are these two vector spaces are canonically isomorphic, or they are naturally isomorphic as vector spaces. These are two terms which you may or may not have heard earlier. Which two terms? This term canonically or naturally. And they have specific meanings in mathematics. So we'll talk about these meanings after we finish the proof of this. So right now the question is, what is the meaning of these two terms? Isomorphic, we know what it means. Okay? So I must show you an isomorphism between these two vector spaces. So how would you construct an isomorphism between these two vector spaces? So so I want to define an isomorphism phi between I just want to get the order correct. So I want to get the order correct. I don't want to say the order wrong. Okay? So I want to define phi 1. So what is the proof of this? I want to define an isomorphism phi 1, phi an isomorphism phi should be from L of Rn, L of Rn Rk to L2 Rn Rk. So let's start defining it. So let T belong to L, Rn, L, Rn, Rk. What does this say? This says that if x is in Rn, T of x is in L, Rn, Rk, T of x is an L, Rn, Rk, and as a variable, x as a variable, T is linear in x. What does T of x is in the L, Rn, Rk? This says that for all y in Rn, T of x evaluated at y is an element in Rk, and for x fixed, T x y is y. So we want to show that the space L, Rn, Rk, and L2 Rn, Rk, this is bilinear map. This is clear what it is. These two spaces are vector spaces are isomorphic. So I want to construct an isomorphism between these two. So let T be an element here. If you fix your x, T of x is in linear maps from Rn to Rk. X is where? X is in Rn. And T is linear in x. That is the meaning that T is in this space. If you fix your y, then Tx of y is linear in y. That is the statement that Tx in this. So you fix a y here, you fix an x here, and look at it as a function of y. Txy is linear in the y. So Txy, when x is fixed, is linear in y. And when y is fixed, or even when y is not fixed, it is linear in x in this setup. Therefore, T itself is a bilinear map in x and y. Okay? So I want to define phi. Define phi by phi of T. Where was T? T is in linear maps from Rn to linear maps from Rn to Rk. And where should phi of T be? Phi of T should be here. So it should tell you what to do at two components in Rn, x comma y. Where is this? This is in Rn, and this is in Rn. And where should this whole thing be? This whole thing should be in Rk. Once you've understood what's going on here, it is clear that the only thing you can do is phi T xy is equal to T of x evaluated at y. Remember, this thing is also in Rk. That's what I've just said here. Okay, T of x evaluated at y is an element in Rk. So remember, where is T of x? T of x, I have written it here. T of x is a linear map from Rn to Rk. Where is x? X is in Rn. T of x is a linear map from Rn to Rk. And where is y? Y is in Rn. And Tx at y is an element in Rk. And what I've just written down here is the statement that T is in fact, phi of T is in fact bilinear. So phi is well defined. So what is the claim? Phi is well defined. What is the meaning of well defined? It means that phi of T actually lies in the space where you want it to lie. Where should phi of T be? If T is here, phi of T should be here. And what I've just said here is that phi is well defined. That means phi of T is in L2 of Rn Rk. That is what I have sort of verified here. Just think about this a little bit. It will take some getting used to. Then I have to show that phi is linear. Where should it be linear? It should be linear in this space. That means it should be linear in T. This means that phi of T1 plus T2 is equal to phi of phi is linear in T. Phi of T1 plus T2 is phi of T1 plus phi of T2, and if lambda is Where are T1s and T2s? T1 and T2s are in this space. Linear maps from Rn to linear maps from Rn to Rk. Where is phi of T1? Phi of T1 is in bilinear maps from Rn to Rk. So this is an equality about bilinear maps. So this is the first thing you have to do. Then of course you have to show that phi is an isomorphism. So the third thing you have to show is that phi is an isomorphism. So we know that if you have a map between vector spaces, which is linear, okay, if it is one-to-one and onto, then it is an isomorphism, because the inverse is also linear. However, it's sort of not that easy to show this one-to-one and onto business, because it really isn't difficult, but one has to be slightly careful. But there's an idea here that you have to get used to. What I will show is that the inverse of phi exists. Okay? So, 1 and inverse of phi. So you want to map psi from, I've erased this thing now. So it should be from bilinear maps on Rn to Rk to linear maps from Rn to linear maps from Rn to Rk. This is what I want, and this psi should be a inverse of phi. So let's just think about this a little bit. Let me take something here. So let eta this means that from eta I want to construct a eta of psi, which should be an element here. Now this is eta is a map from Rn plus Rn to Rk is bilinear. What does bilinear mean? Bilinear means is that fix x in Rn, eta sub x, which is a map from Rn to Rk by eta sub x of y is linear in y. And fix y in Rn, eta sub y is linear in x. Now this also is an idea that you have to get used to when you sort of restrict your domains. The notation is x is fixed here, it's a function of y. Here y is fixed, it's a function of x. But this is precisely the statement that, so if you fix your y, if you fix your x, eta of x of y is linear in y. And if you fix your y, eta sub y of x is eta of xy is linear in x. Therefore, I can define psi of eta define psi of eta. Where should psi of eta be? It should be a linear map from Rn to linear maps from Rn to Rk. So psi of eta at x. So where is psi of eta? Psi of eta is in linear maps from Rn this is what I want. Where is x? X is in Rn. Where should psi of eta at x be? So x is here. Psi of eta at x should be in linear maps from Rn to Rk. So I evaluate this at y. Where is y? Y is in Rn. And where should this whole thing be now? This whole thing should be in Rk. And what is the only thing I can do? Where is eta? Eta is a bilinear map from Rn cross Rn to Rk. So the best thing I should do is define it by eta of x comma y. Eta takes two variables because it's an Rn cross Rn. What are the 2 points in Rn? The 2 points are x and y. Okay. So what do we have to show? We have to show that eta, the psi that I have, the map psi that we have, which I've just defined here, is psi is well defined. What is the meaning of well defined? It says that psi, where was eta? Eta was here. Okay? And eta was in this space. And I wanted psi of eta to be where? I wanted psi of eta to be linear maps from Rn to linear maps from Rn to Rk. So psi of eta, okay, should be a linear map from Rn, but this is exactly what we have. If x is an Rn, psi of eta at x is a linear map from Rn to Rk, and when you evaluate it at some y, this element is an element in Rk. So you have to show that psi is well defined. Then you have to show that psi is linear. And finally, we want to show that psi in fact is the inverse of phi. So and the most important statement is that the psi is what does this statement mean? It says that if I first take phi and then compose it with psi, where was phi going? Phi was going from, I think I've erased it, phi was going from, this quantity is equal to the identity. Which identity? So the domain of phi, I hope I get this right, domain of phi is L of Rn to L of Rn Rk. This is identity on this space. On the space. Which space? This space. Okay. This is not enough to say that psi is the inverse of phi. This just says that psi is the left inverse of phi. And first take psi and then take phi, and this quantity is identity on L2 Rn Rk, which is identity on this says that psi is the left inverse of phi. It also says that phi is the right inverse of psi. This says that phi is the left inverse of psi and psi is the right inverse of phi. So I have to show both these things. This is a very good exercise that you should try and do. If you know this, if you can figure this out and show these two identities, then you really have understood quite a few things about multilinear algebra, about derivatives, about lots and lots of things are going on here. Okay? You've understood what are bilinear maps, which is this, and you've understood what are linear maps from Rn to linear maps from Rn to Rk. So this, in fact, is an exercise. It's a massive exercise. And let me assure you that there is nothing difficult in this exercise. So this is an exercise which is, as I said, computationally very easy. But it is also an exercise that is conceptually quite difficult. So it is a very good, this is something that you should try to do and see if you can come up with the right proof of this statement. If you try to write this whole thing out, it is going to take at least 15 pages of written things if you want to write everything out correctly. But at this stage, it is actually a very good exercise to try and write these 15 pages out. Obviously, I can't do it on a video lecture. So just try to think about this. This is going to take a lot of time for you to digest, but conceptually, this idea is actually very important. So there are two words that I had introduced here. So I should talk a little bit about those two words, which are, the first word is what is meant by canonical. Now, I hope you will go and look up in a dictionary what is meant by canonical. What it basically means that it is, the canon is the holy book, and therefore canonical means something that is written in the holy book, and therefore it is given by God. So in some sense, canonical means God-given. And in mathematics, when do you say that something is canonical? Canonical here means that, you see, there are no choices involved. The Holy Book doesn't give you any choices. You have to do what it says. In this setup, it means that when I wrote this down, I was just following my nose. I was not making any choices of my own. The choices have already been made for me. This is the only thing I can do. And that is the meaning of the term canonical. There is a similar statement about the word natural. So natural also has some very specific meaning in mathematics, and it is actually quite interesting to figure out what the word natural means. When is something said to be natural? So it has something to do with canonical, but it is not only to do with canonical. So these two words, canonical and natural, are words that are used in very specific contexts in mathematics, and this is one of them. And it is quite interesting to figure out what exactly is the meaning of something is natural in mathematics. It has a particular mathematics meaning which has something to do with what is called category theory, And those of you who are interested should try to listen to that. We are not going to be worried. But this is the first example of something that is canonical. And as you can see, there was nothing complicated in this. But to show all these things are actually true takes quite a bit of work. And I would strongly urge that you try and do this by yourself. So, what is the moral of the story? The moral of the story is that bilinear maps are in fact linear maps from Rn to linear maps from Rn to Rk. Why are we interested in linear maps from Rn to linear maps from Rn to Rk? We are interested in this because the second derivative of a function is in fact an element. Second derivative of a function evaluated at a point is in fact an element here. And therefore, by this canonical isomorphism, I can think of the second derivative as in fact being a bilinear map. What is the third derivative? The third derivative at a point is a linear map from Rn to linear maps from Rn to linear maps from Rn to Rk. And what would exactly the same proof do? It will tell you that a third order derivative is isomorphic, is actually a trilinear map by the same isomorphism. So here I've done it for bilinear maps, but the same thing is true for trilinear maps. The third order derivative, which is a linear map from linear maps to Rk, is in fact a trilinear map from Rn to Rk. This is why multilinear maps are actually very important when you're talking about derivatives, because higher order derivatives can be identified with multilinear maps. So we are going to spend a lot of time talking about multilinear maps in the next few weeks. And we'll start with this the next time.